got moved.
Oh, I really remember this one.
Yeah, we all kind of just sort of chatted and nobody said. But I'll sit anywhere. Would you like to be? You're moving up the rung though. So.
At the table.
Yeah, right.
Hospitality events.
Anne Marie, this is like a public.
So I need to call, I can make a motion to call to,
Well, you would say I called
call
it
and
to order.
then has to go in session, right?
Yeah, and then, and then if you want to entertain the motion to, I don't know if you need a motion to move the agenda, to move that thing up,
Okay.
or if you just do it.
Are you chairing?
For
gonna be late.
now, he's gonna be late.
Okay. And
I just don't know where Khalil is.
are we doing,
Can we give him a quick buzz?
Yeah.
are we doing, executive?
No, Khalil's coming.
I hope not, 'cause I'm here.
Yeah, we shouldn't have. Because people are here.
Good morning, Janelle.
Good morning.
It's late in the week. Yeah,
I thought Phil, Barnes.
it's Cinco de Mayo everywhere.
Will's here.
He's coming. Hey, you got 2 minutes, man.
Yeah.
Watch the boards.
This is time early at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we might have to make it second. If he's not on, then we need to make it second, not first.
Hi.
That,
The
Okay.
University of Delaware
okay.
isn't on. Okay, you're getting unmuted. Okay.
Okay, good behavior, everyone.
Do you want the gavel?
No. Unless someone's gonna start, speaking out of turn here, and we'll gavel them down.
YouTube's live too.
Okay, everything's live and it's 10 o'clock, so you are,
You're on.
It is 10 o'clock, Thursday, May 5th. The mayor is going to be a bit late, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Can I go ahead and get a motion to go to a public session?
You got it.
So moved.
All right. Everyone in agreement?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so we will have some adjustment in the order of the agenda. We will stick with the first one, B1, the annexation presentation, but B5, there will be some participation from the University of Delaware Resiliency folks and their time constraints, so we might move them up in the schedule if they get on there. So, Melanie, are you the presenter for the annexation subcommittee? Yes. Fantastic. And are there attachments that we could maybe bring up on to the screen? Excellent. All right, Melanie, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Mel.
First off, I would like to say that we had public meetings. The attendance was very sparse, but we did have all public meetings, so all of this information was discussed publicly. And you can see the participation from the Planning Commission. Nancy and Bob participated. I think you've seen this slide before where it talks about the city of Lewes and how we really wanted to make the annexation compatible, but at the same time give them a lot of design flexibility. Ultimately, what we would like to see is sociable, pedestrian-oriented neighborhoods patterned on the city of Lewes. Next, please. And this is a planning concept called the traditional neighborhood design. So this is not something I invented. This is something that's been around now for probably 20 or 30 years. Next. So the goals are, again, to use Lewes development patterns to engender a sense of place and identity in a new development, give design flexibility, have interconnected streets and walkways so that we can all meet each other, have usable, flexible open space areas, and to respect neighbors. Okay, next. So the cluster development definition, I believe, is being adjusted in the new subdivision regs. But what we want to see is a close grouping of houses set off from similar groups by an intervening open space and incorporating a special community facility or feature. Okay, next. Again, here are some of the elements that we're adding for increased flexibility. So we're reducing the minimum square footage for townhouses, we're reducing the minimum lot width, and we're reducing and encouraging variability to the front yard setback. Next. For two-family homes or duplexes, similarly, we are reducing the minimum lot area to 5,000 square feet. And I would remind the council that, in fact, the zoning that allows two-family homes has similarly reduced the square footage for lot area. So we're going even a little smaller than that.
I have a question, please. May I interrupt you?
Yes.
This 5,000 square foot, is this per unit or for the two housing units to be placed on a
Yes, for the two
5,000
housing-
square foot?
For the two housing units to be placed, yes.
Okay, and would this apply to fee simple ownership or
Yes.
condominium ownership? Would there be any differentiation?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next. And so I'm showing here an illustration of a new development that's been proposed in Ithaca, New York, where there is a central open space that's very meaningful to this community because a lot of the homes face that open space. Okay, next. But at the same time, while offering flexibility, we're also adding some new requirements. So the homes must be oriented to an existing street. Okay, and the garage, we're encouraging that garages be accessed off an alley in the rear, or if they cannot, that they be on the side of the home, or if they cannot be on the side of a home, that the garage be set back from the front, so that as you're passing on the street, you're not confronted by this massive garage, but it must be set back from the street, from the front of the house. We're offering variability. We want to encourage, again, variability in the type, size, style, and price of homes within this annexation development. Variability in the front setback. And again, I'll show some illustrations on this. And that there be a central, usable, flexible open space. Okay, next.
Molly, will you get into, sorry to interrupt, but where you talk about the pricing variety, did you talk about the strategies of how you convince someone who wants to, say, pay for $1 million home to convince them to buy next to someone who may have a $300,000 or $400,000 home?
No, I don't think so. I think what we want to see is that, in fact, there be some smaller homes and some larger homes. And
So you're
we would
encouraging that.
understand that the smaller homes would be less expensive than the larger ones. So I don't think we're looking to place, you know, a minimum-sized house next to a mansion. We just want to see, again, very similar to the traditional pattern here in Lewes, is you see large houses, but there are small houses also. And we want to see that replicated. Well, okay, so again, going back to the fronts facing the street, this is becoming so common along the roads in Sussex County, where you don't see the home, you don't see the front yard or the backyard. What you see is a fence or a berm and fence, completely cutting you off from that neighbor.
Right.
Okay, which says, I don't belong to you, I belong to my own little community. Okay, next. Orientation to street. Okay, again, just encouraging, enforcing that. And here we see a lot of porches. We're going to encourage porches to be built on the homes, front porches. Again, it just engenders that sense of sociability. You know, if someone was sitting on that porch, I would probably stop and have a conversation with them. You know, it's one of those architectural features that seems to encourage sociability. Okay, next. Okay, the garage in the rear. On the slide on the top, you see townhomes where the garage has been placed in the rear. The streetscape is very pleasant. You see entrances, there's no cars you have to walk by to go along on the street, as opposed to the townhomes that you see in the lower slide, where, in fact, the garages are at street level, in front. There's no definition to where the sidewalk is because everything is paved. So
There's no sidewalk.
There's no sociability here. There's no opportunity for it.
Well, it's quite, excuse me for being late, and I apologize, but, the difference is what was being built in the late 19th century and early 20th century versus what's been built since the 60s throughout America.
Yes.
And so what you're trying to do is revert back to a more
Yes.
similar situation.
Exactly.
Obviously, as the public has become so dependent upon vehicular transportation, the car has become the dominant feature.
Right.
Good, thank you.
Okay, next. Okay, so the precedents that we have here, particularly for rear garages and alley access to them, are DeVries Circle and Ship Carpenter Square. Next. Okay, here's an aerial view of DeVries Circle. And what you see is that, in fact, the roadway is a big loop, and that across the center, I've labeled the alley. Now, it's not paved, it's a dirt alley, but nevertheless, it functions, and it makes the streetscape very pleasant because what you see are the fronts of homes. Okay, next. And even side access garages here. Yes.
I really am a big supporter of this idea of side entrance garages. I love the idea of the garage located off of an alley. But I'm reminded that in one of your earlier slides, I think it's shown on page, I'm not sure what page it is, but anyway, you speak about reducing the size of lots. And I don't know how you're going to accomplish a side entrance garage or possibly even a rear entrance garage when you have reduced the lot size upon which each home is constructed.
Right.
I think that could be a real challenge. I love the idea, but
I
it's a
agree.
challenge.
And in fact, this garage is accessed off the
Off of
to the alley.
alley,
Right.
correct.
So
Yeah,
that's one opportunity.
that is an opportunity, right.
One of the other things that might have to be considered is allowing tandem parking. Right now, we don't
Correct.
allow tandem parking
Right.
in a driveway. And if you're with a 50-foot lot, you could take 12 feet off for a driveway, but you couldn't take and
Right, stacked.
stack parking.
Correct.
So you would have to change the city code to accommodate the idea that you could have that kind of stacked parking as opposed to tandem only.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay,
thank you.
next. Okay, and here we see Ship Carpenter Square, and you can see the road that is the interior road there that really has access to all of the off-street parking for those units. And it's very pleasant. It's very well done. And this is what we want to see happen. Okay, next. Okay, if in those events where it doesn't work, then we want to see the garage setback. We don't want to see it prominent on the facade of the house. We want to see the facade. Okay?
There's another consideration there because of our only allowing 15% of impervious surface to be decks, patios, walkways, things like that. that would create a bigger driveway than what's currently being allowed with these front-loaded garages. So that would be another consideration when looking at impervious surface coverage. How would that impact that? Because it
Right.
might mean if you have a driveway that's set back 15 to 20 feet,
adding.
you cannot, you either have to allow an increase in the amount of impervious surface coverage, or that is not the house, or you have to reduce the amount of people's space that they could have for a patio or a deck or something
Or
like
you
that.
incentivize people to use pervious material in the, in that
Exactly.
driveway.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the only way you could get around
Right.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Some
Right.
folks downtown have the driveways with the grass that grows, so it's just enough.
Right.
Absolutely.
that's
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There's a couple on Pilot John
There
Road.
are many ways of getting to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Several ways to skin
Right,
that cat.
yeah.
Okay, next.
These are just things that happen, you
Right.
know, that-
Right, no, they're great points that,
yeah.
okay. We talked about having the variety of housing type links to the number of units also. So for example, if you only have about 25 units, you could have one style of house. But once you get to beyond that, then you might have to have two or three, depending on the numbers. And we're not sure of those numbers yet, what exactly they should be.
And when you speak of variety, you're not speaking of model, you're speaking
Right.
of, what are the qualities?
Single family versus towns,
Okay.
towns versus, or
Okay.
towns versus duplexes.
Okay,
Singles
got it.
and duplexes, so some mix of housing types.
Right, got it, thank you.
Again, and I think that will also help with giving the various prices within the annexation area.
Right,
So for example, if you had a total of 50 units, you could have 20 duplexes and 30 towns.
tell me something, Melanie, how would this work with our zoning that we presently have? Because the zoning, in effect, if you have R2, for example, how does that accommodate this kind of mixture that you're suggesting?
Well, the annexation rules have always been kind of separate in a chart.
I'm not talking about annexation.
No, but it's,
This is-
AX
well, I-
res zoning district.
right, so this
Got-
is a separate zone.
Okay, I understand, go ahead.
So it would apply only within this zone. It wouldn't
Okay.
apply, globally.
Right,
And you see that at the Village of Five Points.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
but you don't also, because you have definite defined areas where single-family detached homes are found, then you have apartments in a separate parcel, and then you have the townhomes,
Right.
again, in a separate. So it's not the kind of mix that you're describing here.
Well,
It-
it could be done, though, where all the duplexes are in one area and all the towns are in another area.
Yeah.
Or they could be mixed in. I mean,
Okay, but I think
depends
what
on the
you're
developer.
suggesting with 25 units or fewer, and you expect this mix, that would all be probably accommodated in one zone. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's in one development.
Right.
But you're also saying that they
Right.
can be separate within the development.
Yes.
So you could have an area that was all townhouses and an
Correct.
area that was freestanding.
Exactly.
But it's all zoned AX res. I mean,
Yes.
the whole idea is it's not zoned R2 and R5, it's all AX res, and it's designed in accordance with these standards.
Correct,
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
correct. Right. We'll talk some more about
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Okay, next. Okay, varying front setbacks. This is, I think it's a great idea, and actually, I worked in a community.
Yeah.
I think it was Chesapeake City in Maryland, where they actually said there's a maximum front setback that they wanted.
Right.
Of 10 feet, so that, and houses had to have porches, so that, again, you're encouraging that sociability. So here, I'm showing a street here in Lewes, and the house on the right is set back probably 20 feet, 22 feet, something like that. The house beyond it is probably only set back 8 or 10 feet, and the house beyond it seems to be sitting
Even
almost
closer.
on the right-of-way line.
Right,
So
right.
there is great variability in
Okay,
in
let's
Lewes.
talk about EBLs there. Are we abolishing that idea with this proposal?
Yeah, yeah,
So we would be getting rid of that completely?
yes.
Only in
Well, only in this
Only in
zone.
the X.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
district.
Well, our-
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think largely the annexed pieces are not going to have existing homes on them.
No,
EVL doesn't
no,
apply
but-
in that zone.
Yeah.
EVL only applies in certain zones.
Yeah, I understand that also, but we're not also bringing that idea forward into the annex, into AX
No.
Res.
No, but
Okay.
our
Okay.
present code does not have a maximum setback.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the things, we use 25 feet or the established
Is your
building line.
minimum.
Right.
But we do not have a maximum setback, and that's another issue that is unrelated to the AX Res zone, but something that we may need to consider as we go forward.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what we were suggesting was that the front setback be anything from 10 to 20 feet. So, again, leaving it to the developer to design what he wants to design. Or we could establish a maximum front setback. I mean, I'm very open to that idea as well.
Right. It seems to me that that should be proportional to the depth of the property.
Possibly.
You know, we can talk about that, it's just, I'm throwing an idea
Yeah.
out. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Melanie, is there anything that you've done to encourage varying setbacks so that you don't have this sort of Levittown view where it's right down the line, every
Well,
home's got-
exactly, that's what we're trying to avoid, and we're going to very strongly encourage varying setbacks. And a lot of these things that are not strictly requirements, we're going to say, if you don't conform with this, you have to give us a very good reason why you're not.
Okay, so it's more encouragement and then giving
Yeah,
incentives to maybe do so. Okay.
yeah. Okay, next. Okay, again, the idea of a central, usable, flexible open space. It doesn't have to be huge. If you have a small subdivision, it could be the central place where there's a common mail drop-off area. There are a lot of those in communities that I've worked in, and they are really sociable points. Where you
Right.
go and pick up that's where you're going to meet your neighbors.
Right.
Which happens with Ship Carpenter Square, in that green in the center.
Yeah, yeah,
That was the intent, anyway.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, next. Okay, and again, I'm showing a central, flexible, open space. You can fly a kite here, you can play ball here, you can have a community picnic here. It's very usable. Okay, next. And no little gazebo.
Really?
Strong recommendations, again. We're going to say with these recommendations that you have to justify if you're not conforming with these. Okay, so front porches, varying front setback, pathway linkages, narrow streets, interconnected streets. We want to discourage cul-de-sacs. Organically shaped stormwater management. Okay. I think the one that was done in Mariner's Retreat is just lovely. It's very organic. It's a whole series of them that are
Meander.
really meander and are reacting to what's around them. The wetlands on one side, homes on some sides, and other property lines on others. So they were forced there, I think, into doing that kind of thing. But that's what we want to see. We don't want to see rectangular holes in the ground, with no planting.
Right.
Okay? And then transition of density when we're adjacent to existing communities. Okay, so next. Again, front porch is such a common item in Lewes. Now, not every house has a front porch, but, some of them are really lovely and encourage sociability. Next. Varying sizes, style, and of the houses. So the one on the left takes up a lot of street frontage. It's a wide house. The one next to it is narrower, and the one next to it is smaller. So, this is the kind of thing that we want to see. Okay, next. Interconnected streets. Here's the other side of the bridge. And everything's been laid out on a grid, yes, but they're also all interconnected so that there's ease of access, there's ease of emergency access by this kind of layout. And they don't have to be straight streets. They can be They can still be winding and whatnot, but we want to see interconnectedness. Okay, next. The organically shaped stormwater management. Okay, I don't have to convince you guys. Okay, next. Okay, transition. So here is an illustration that shows higher density on the right, and as we come to the existing density, which is lower on the left, there's a transition from the very tall buildings to shorter buildings. It could even be that it's the same height as the transition, as the neighboring property. But we want to see some recognition that there is a neighbor. And again, do we really have to have berms and
No.
fences
Right,
between
right.
these
No.
communities? You know, it cuts people off
Yeah.
from meeting each other, from interaction. Okay, next.
I have a question, may I?
Yes.
Would you go back to the last slide, please? When you show the example of the 3 or 4-story building on the right side, is the suggestion there that that taller building would be found, of course, I know we're talking about in the annexation district, but is the idea that that taller building would be found on the, if you will, the city side? In other words, closer to the existing city
Yes.
lines? Is that
Yes.
correct? But
Yes.
is that right? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. And you wouldn't find it, for example, on the western edge of an annex parcel of land? You would find it?
Not likely, yes.
Not likely, okay.
More internal,
Yeah,
yes.
got it, thank you.
Okay.
I'm very pleased to see you've discussed interconnectivity. When you look at Powhatan Village, Powhatan Park, Powhatan Reserve, they're all interconnected.
Right.
But as we've looked at newer developments since then, we've lost that interconnectivity.
Yes, we
I'm
have.
very pleased to see you put that back in.
Yes.
And then what I would add is, as far as interconnectivity, I would really like to see emphasis done on pedestrian bike interconnectivity. I actually believe that there's value in having streets that end in cul-de-sacs. I don't like the idea of a blunt dead end, but I do like the idea of cul-de-sacs because, in fact, there's a market for it if you want to think upon it in that kind of crass terms of city planning. But there is reason for cul-de-sacs. There are reasons for that. And yet, we're all reliant upon interconnectivity to be able to get to the adjacent neighborhood. And whereas Ted is correct in his description of the Pilot Town Village communities, that connectivity is all based upon car interconnectivity and not pedestrian. We don't have trails that connect the different communities together.
That's
And
true.
that's shameful. And we're putting pedestrians in the street to accommodate that kind of interconnectivity.
Right.
And we have
Right.
got to move away from that.
There's just one of those communities that actually has sidewalks.
Yeah.
That's
No,
right.
But those,
And so all
And-
through the rest of
And
the
they're the
community,
farthest one from the city.
people
those-
walk in the streets.
Yeah,
which is terrible.
you have to.
You
but
have
those
to.
3 communities were developed distinctly different times over about a 20-year period, and there was no requirement when Powhatan Village and Powhatan Park were built for
Correct.
sidewalks.
Correct.
But by the time Powhatan Reserve was developed, sidewalks were again mandated by code, and that's what happened there.
Right.
And there was a great deal of resistance, as I recall, on the part of the developer about putting those sidewalks in.
Oh, sure,
Yes, exactly.
costs more money.
Right. And which also resulted in curb trees, which also met resistance. So
Right. Right.
Yeah, so going back and adding those sidewalks may be a possibility, but that's a whole other story.
The other thing that I need to mention is if we're going to make pathways be interconnected, then as we've seen again at Mariners Retreat, the developer doesn't really want someone outside of his community using his pathways.
Right.
And so we might have to change the
Sure.
rules to make some of those pathways public,
Correct.
Absolutely.
in which case the city needs to take maintenance and liability
Yep. Leadership.
for those.
Yeah.
Well, we have the same thing that went on between Canary Creek and Harbor Point, although it's difference between within the city and county. But there was no interest in the interconnectivity there. There isn't even a pathway between those 2 developments.
Right.
But yet there's the utility easement that connects them.
Right.
Right. And that actually speaks to the practice that we have in this city of entering into pre-annexation agreements where that kind of provision is not required of the developer of those properties that, when they sign the pre-annexation agreement. And that's, I think, very short-sighted on our part that's not provided for in
Right.
those pre-annexation agreements.
Right.
This is a sea change, this recommendation is, I think, a very good one, but it is a sea change compared, because I think when there was discussion about White Meadows Pond and the interconnectivity to Bay Breeze, the Bay Breeze
Oh, right.
residents met with great,
Right.
spoke up with great resistance to
Yes.
the idea of any interconnectivity there.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
and I am glad you raised that, because when you go into that community now, they put a large berm at the backside separating their community from breakwater. And if you go there and visit that site, it's a very awkward berm. You would think that they were trying to keep the ocean out of their community, it's so high. But the funny thing is that it's obviously a pedestrian trail, because there's, a dirt
But it's
path
already there.
crossing over.
Full central open space. Next. And
That's
that's
it.
my presentation.
That's
Thank you.
great.
It's a
Thank you very much.
fantastic idea.
Can I make a quick comment? Before Melanie? First of all, thank you very much for all the hard work you and your committee have done. I think we can all see that this took a lot of time and a lot of focus. One of the things that struck me about the whole idea of the interconnected, communities and others is, and this is ancillary to what you've done, but reason I really support this and like it and encourage it is the whole concept of proximity. And I'm getting a little more 30,000 feet here, but I love the idea of bringing people together because, the current polarization we have everywhere in this country, including here, whether it's political, cultural, racial, or otherwise, ethnically, to me, the way to solve that and address that is proximity. And that is being with people next door, not with a fence, people who don't look like you, talk like you, or think like you. And the way to address that, as far as I'm concerned, is proximity. Brian Stevenson, probably Milton's favorite son, wrote about this very eloquently in his book. So I think it's a great idea, and I just think that's another benefit of bringing people together.
Great. Okay. we
Great,
will move
thanks a
forward.
lot, Melanie.
Thank you, Melanie. Appreciate it.
We need to change this agenda at all, or
Yeah, so,
we need,
Are they on?
yeah, we talked about that.
is Brian here?
They're
Are
here.
they here?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so Phil and Jen are here,
Okay,
so.
so let's go ahead and bring them up.
Right.
Yeah, I've been trying. I don't know.
They're not clicking, they're not doing yes.
Great. I just texted Phil.
Yeah, I think that's, she had sent me a
Oh,
note.
Phil's on the panel now, so Phil's good to go.
Get him, bring him on screen if we can.
He is.
There he is. Hey,
There
Phil.
he is.
How are you? You're muted, I think.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
So, are you,
I allowed him to share his screen.
okay. So,
Okay.
are you gonna, do you have anything to share on your screen, Phil or Jen? Okay.
No.
Okay, so we'll just talk through it. Janelle, do you want to kind of kick it off?
Sure. So I think as everybody knows is that the Lewes Executive Committee on Resiliency has been meeting for almost the good part of a year.
October.
And they have finished their work and are providing 2 recommendations to Mayor and Council for consideration. The first is the development of a real estate disclosure. So when you buy any property in the city, it would let you know that you're in the floodplain or not, and that you could be impacted by sea level rise. And the second, it would be the development of a resiliency fund that had a number of different categories into it. There was discussion about how it should be used and what kind of funding mechanisms could be used to create that fund that would then go towards some sustainability projects, some resiliency projects. So those are the 2 recommendations that did come out from the committee. There were also a number of there were a good about a dozen different topics overall that the committee did consider, but these were the two that they wanted to focus on and promoted and made the recommendation towards for mayor and council to consider.
Yeah, thank you. I think before we go too much further, we should note that the committee was made up of 11 residents of the community of
Correct.
varying skill sets and varying degrees of property ownership, some commercial, some residential, some with more other types of backgrounds, engineering, et cetera, financial, et cetera. And I think the other thing is that after the very good job that was done by the DENREC and University of Delaware to bring everybody to the same level, they then identified 14 items that for possible consideration, and they distilled that down to 2,
Right.
which you already mentioned, thank you, and that those 2, the other 12 remain viable. We didn't discard them. They will be things that that council could consider going forward.
Yes.
Great. Phil, I think after that, we're ready for you and Jen to
Take it
go
away.
take it away. Yeah, thank you, Phil.
Yeah, thank you. So as Mayor said, we've been working for a while. We have the 2 recommendations from the Executive Committee on Resiliency that Janelle described. The additional policy options that were considered but ultimately not taken up for formal recommendations. As the mayor mentioned, what we intend to do is to write a short memo that we will then present to the mayor, describing those options, what they were, and then some of the strengths and weaknesses of them, so that if the city of Lewes decides to pursue this conversation further, you don't have to rehash. I mean, you certainly can, but you'll be privy to the conversations that were had in the committee and some of the advantages, disadvantages, strengths and weaknesses. I don't know quite how to describe it. Basically, we did sort of a quick policy analysis of each of these options, and we're going to present that information to you. Unfortunately, we don't have it ready right now, but it will be presented to the mayor and be available to the city should the city continue to pursue resiliency measures.
I
And
think
so
that-
Jen Wrights, my colleague from IPA, who's on the call here, and who really was the MC for the committee. We just wanted to make ourselves available to council. You know, we've been working with the committee for many months. We understand that they've made recommendations. Those recommendations will be translated into language that could be available for public comment and ultimately, hopefully, adoption by council. So at this stage, we felt it was prudent to make ourselves available to council to answer any questions or provide any feedback that they may have at this time.
I think the main thing we're looking for from council today, because at this point, we've got kind of the skeleton structure of how the disclosure statement would work and how a resiliency fund might work. Is council on board with staff working with legal counsel and potentially GMB as well to bring these to more fully formed proposals, and how it would apply to come back for, further consideration. So again, the 2 recommendations that came out with some ideas on how it would be shaped are the real estate disclosure and the resiliency fund, but it's not a fully baked proposal yet. We wanted to put it before you and get, kind of your thoughts on.
As relates to having our staff work on it.
Right.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I would, I don't know if this is on or not.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I would focus a lot on the funding mechanism for the resiliency fund, because I think that's going to be the biggest challenge, is where we get that money.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
I think that the idea of having staff work on the development of both of these, because of the disclosure form will be significant, because what was discussed by the committee, and Cordelia, you were a member, were things like the history of the property and whether or not there had been flood insurance and how that would impact, and
Right.
whether there had been any history of flooding. And some properties will have more than others.
Right.
So I think that, that will be important. But and then, of course, I think Khalil's absolutely right, the issue of how it would be funded and what level it would be funded. Because we heard, the committee did look at a variety of other communities and how they're funding it, whether it's a
Right.
flat fee or whether it's, an increase in property tax to do it or what.
Right, and
So-
they kind of ranked some funding sources as well.
Right, they were ranked.
So,
But I do think whatever we do, it would come before council for consideration, and then it would have to go to a public hearing, so that we could get maximum amount of public input in terms of what we're
Okay.
doing.
so I guess,
We just need a motion.
I don't think you need a motion. I think if,
Presumably it'll take longer to do the resiliency fund piece than it would be the letter. And I think we discussed previously, do we want to bring that for a public hearing that's one package? Or do we want to bring it forward as two things together?
yeah, I mean, I think, I would say it might be cleaner to bring them as individual things so that people,
Can focus.
Focus on one.
can digest each one. And people's opinions may be different depending on which one it is.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's also important to publish the other 12 items.
Right.
Because we may hear from the public that some of those other 12 items, because some of that were amount of freeboard, some of it was impervious surface coverage and things like that, that may generate a whole nother discussion, which, in terms of what the committee felt was important versus what the community feels is important, there may be other items that would rise to the level of, maybe it's not 3 items, maybe it's 3, maybe it's not 2 items, maybe it's 3.
Well, Resiliency Group said they would write us a memo.
Right,
defining what
exactly.
the rest
No,
of
they're
them
going to
would
do
be,
that. So we'll have that
Yeah,
information.
we'll have that. I think at this point, we need to just make a decision on it.
Yeah, so the sense, I mean, I'm feeling and hearing a sense of council that this is worth continuing to flesh out, and then we'd bring it back at a separate
Correct.
workshop meeting, and then,
Correct.
you guys can discuss
Correct.
it if we
Right.
need to make changes
Yep.
to
Right.
whatever we
Yeah, I
bring
think we're all in
forward,
agreement there.
After we've had
before it
some,
goes to some sort of a public comment.
correct.
Definitely.
So, okay.
All right.
But I think we need to thank Jen and Phil very much for all the work that you put into putting this group together. And it was, meeting twice a month for
Right.
all the months that we did. And I want to thank all 11 members of the committee who worked as well. It was a yeoman's job, and we really do appreciate it. It initiated a discussion that, as we look to deal with resiliency and sea level rise, is very, very timely, and we thank you for your efforts. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, Phil or Jen?
No, thank you all, and, we will transmit the memo when it's available,
Okay.
hopefully shortly, in the next couple weeks or so. And, our formal role, I guess, in the process is done, but our informally, we are available, happy to attend these meetings, and answer any questions that may come up during the process.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. All right, so I think then we're ready to move on to the next item, correct?
B2.
That would be 2, which is presentation and update regarding the 2015 Comprehensive 5-Year Plan Review. And there was a workshop last week, which was very well attended, I think. And Savannah, I don't see Savannah here. Is she going to join us?
I'm not sure, but I can provide an update. So as the mayor has stated, we did hold a public workshop last week. A great number of people showed up. We were still tallying the number of people, but just on a brief count, we had over 80 people show up, which was wonderful. If people haven't had the opportunity to provide that feedback, you can go to the city's website. There's a dedicated webpage for the comprehensive plan update, and you can actually participate there if you haven't participated, because we're just looking for general information about, some of the ideas that we came up with regarding the 5 chapters. So again, this update is focusing on 5 chapters. It's housing, utilities, annexation, historical and cultural resources, and the environment. So those are the 5 items we're looking at for the chapters to look at, new recommendations as we go forward for the next 5 years as the city moves forward. So we are working with Rossi. They are the city's consultant, and I know a number of people met them last week. We are providing updates to the mayor and council, and we're also providing updates to the planning commission. So as we take all the data that we've collected, we'll be taking all of that, presenting it back to the planning commission based on what we heard from the public, turning those into recommendations, so we can move forward to getting feedback from planning commission, getting their recommendation, bring it to mayor and council, so that we can move forward and getting the addendum adopted by the state. So we will keep moving forward.
Janelle, I have a question. You mentioned that still open, this process is still open for participation, public participation.
Yes.
Do you have a cutoff date for when that will close?
Saturday.
This Saturday?
This Saturday, because it's more than a week past the date
Right.
of the workshop, so then we can get everything moving forward.
Okay, so, and is that Saturday midnight, like Friday night at midnight?
I
or
think
is it
it's end of
anytime?
close of business is when the forms shut off,
Okay, so
which
that
is
would
like
really.
4 o'clock.
Okay, so that's really Friday evening at 4, right? Is that right?
It's Saturday to middle.
for Saturday.
Oh, it
Yeah.
is set up for Saturday?
Yep.
Okay.
Close of business Saturday.
Okay, I wasn't aware we were
I
open
just
for business.
picked a 4
But I
o'clock
just learned
date
something.
time frame.
See that?
We're
We're open
virtually-
24 hours.
Yeah,
Somebody's going to be here at 4 o'clock. That's
yeah,
right.
we're like Wawa, okay.
I'll get the emails, so
Thank you, I just want to clarify.
Not a
Thank
problem.
you.
I do think it's worth noting how we got to this point. We've been submitting an annual update for the comp plan, which has been more or less just an update. And I think as we looked at the 15 plan, we recognized that there were so many changes that had occurred from 15 to now that we needed to do a more comprehensive review. We opted not to take on the complete rewrite of the plan, but we recognized that both in city and in the surrounding lands, so many things had changed that we really needed to do a more comprehensive update of the plan than just write another update.
right, because the state does require an annual update going, hey, how have you implemented your plan? And while the city has made progress, the 5 chapters that were settled on was between a facilitated discussion between the planning commission and mayor and council.
Right.
So the 2 bodies came together, had a facilitated discussion, and these are the topics that rose to the top, and that became the scope of the work for the comprehensive plan addendum is how we're going to be looking at it.
Right.
Because those were the 5 chapters that really needed a focus based on what we had heard to take a look at, because so much had changed in the time frame when the plan had been adopted to where we are now.
Correct.
And then again, we'll start looking at that, and then we'll continue to implement that. And then, of course, at the 10 years, we'll take another look and see where it is. But again, we'll do that annual implementation and report to the state, letting them know where we are as we continue to move forward and we continue to implement the comprehensive plan.
I just wanted to clarify that because, there was a comment made the other evening that we had not been submitting updates to the comp plan.
Yeah, no, we submit them
We
every
just-
year. I will be doing one
I heard that.
at the end of June for July, because they will be asked,
I heard.
because I do them, and I believe the mayor signs them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we update them and we review them and.
Yep, and we send them to the
Now, I
state.
have one more question about the comp plan.
Yes.
I know we frequently refer to it as the 2015 plan, but it was really approved in 2017.
Correct.
So
True.
is our next rewrite dated 2025, or are we on a 2027 schedule?
It's 2027.
Okay.
Because you go from 10 years from when it's adopted.
right.
So, and it's the same thing that the county has. It's the 2015 plan, but was adopted like.
Adopted in 17.
Yes, so, or theirs was adopted in 16, so. So you can call it the 2017 plan, the plan actually says 2015, but
Correct.
it was adopted in 2017, so that's when our
That's the
10
actual
years.
date.
Just
Yeah,
keep
and
it
that's
in
why
2
in
years.
2022, we're doing the 5-year review, because it's,
Right.
otherwise we're 2 years late.
Right.
And it's from the date of adoption.
We may wish to retitle the plan with the year it's adopted.
Yes,
That's true, it would be a lot easier.
Well,
a little less
let's back up a
confusing.
little bit here and clarify what happened in 15. It wasn't ready, and then it was submitted, and it came back for additional revisions.
It was 2 years of
Back and
negotiating with the
forth.
state,
Yeah.
back and
So
forth.
it wasn't
Right.
like, we intentionally delayed
No.
the
Right.
submission.
I'm not
Good.
suggesting
And-
that.
Yeah,
No.
no, but
Yeah.
just for the record, let's make sure that people.
But I think it does,
Process with the addendum then.
So the 27 plan should be, the 25
Yeah, it's back and
plan
forth.
could not get approved until 27.
yeah, I don't
Yes.
expect the same type of back and forth on a 5-year review.
No.
No, because we're just making some, and again, I think we're going to be making new recommendations, because I think even for the historical and cultural resources, we implemented that recommendation. So we're looking at new recommendations to implement over the next 5 years.
Correct.
And then we'll start over. The new plan will need to be adopted by 2027. I'm going to say it's October of 2027.
Right.
Because that's when the 2015 plan got adopted, was October of 2017.
Right.
So we have until October of 2020 for the 10-year, and we have October for the 5-year. So that's what, we are on a tight time frame. But we plan on getting it to the updates to the state
In timely.
in August, September timeframe, so that we can have it adopted in October.
Okay,
And so-
thank you.
So the delay was fully approved in conjunction with the Office of State Planning, just for the record.
Yes, and a lot of places do need a 6-month or 1-year delay, because things happen. And I know several towns that have asked for multiple 1-year
Extensions.
extensions.
Yeah, okay.
No, with the participants, do you have much
Just 1 minute, Joe.
detail in terms of where they're, sort of coming from throughout the city, and sort of see if there was a heavy participation, one of residents out of town, or there are actually people contributing to the input that may not be residents, or pockets of where they may live out of Lewes?
So we have not, we did ask for everybody's address, but we're still digging through that data as of right now, because the meeting was just last Tuesday. So we're still going through, last Tuesday, sorry.
I know, it seems like.
And then she went to the West Coast.
But you were capturing that.
Yes, we did, it was a conference, and I went all every day. It really was.
Stay back from Travis, because she's on West Coast time.
Hang in there.
I'll get there, but yeah, no, we did ask for all that, so we will look into all of that. And even if you do the online, we ask for your address, so we can get that information.
Okay,
Joe,
yeah.
Hocker, you had a question? Would you come up and identify yourself?
Sure.
Yeah, Joe Hockner, 305 Seagull Drive. At last week's review, I was surprised about the aversion to rain barrels. And just to let the public know, I have 5 of them. They're very well behaved, very quiet. And, nothing against BPW, but every time I water my plants with this free water, I just feel good inside. It's just free water available. So, but just think about rain barrels.
They're going to put a water meter on your gutters.
Exactly. We have a solution for that.
Thanks, Joe. All right, are there any other questions for Janelle or comments about the update on the comprehensive plan? Hearing none, let's move on then to the presentation regarding the West Cedar flood mitigation study. Charlie?
Thank you. Just so you know, I'm on East Coast time.
Sorry for you.
So I want to introduce our team for the West Cedar Avenue flood mitigation study that's been ongoing for coming up on 2 years. We've completed it last month, but it's been a while we've been working on it. Today with me I have Brent Jett. He's a professional engineer. He's also a certified floodplain manager and certified climate professional. So obviously he's got a lot of background and was a big help in putting this together. I'm going to turn a majority of this presentation over to Brent after some brief introductory remarks. And then I have Carly Lecomte, she's an environmental scientist at GMB, and just super integral in putting everything together in terms of all the modeling we're going to show you and GIS work. So Carly's here as well. So just as a little background, the city completed a study in 2015, which was entitled Evacuation Route and Critical Structure Vulnerability Study. When we identified those vulnerable areas back at that time, this West Cedar Avenue area, between basically Michigan Avenue and Missouri is the worst of it, but you can consider it all the way to the inlet, popped up. It wasn't a huge surprise that it did because we've been, experiencing huge surge flood problems out there for many, many years. So just some historical background on that part of it. Back in the days when the core dredge spoil sites were installed, they installed also berms to varying elevations. And in one of the berms closest to West Cedar Avenue, there was a corrugated metal drainage pipe that allowed water to come in and come out. Sometime in the 70s, I estimate that corrugated metal pipe began to deteriorate, and when it collapsed, it also collapsed the surrounding berm. So that berm kept getting more and more open, which as these surge tides come in, and we're going to talk a lot about this, we don't see the surge tides that much on the beach side, but we see them, everybody's pretty much aware of this by now, on the canal side and through Canary Creek. And so when those surge tides come in on the canal side, they had a much wider opening through that berm to get in, which is a primary reason for why this particular area gets surge flooded when we have northeast type storms. So just a little background on that. Further background, the BPW and I tried to just simply replace that corrugated metal pipe and kind of fill in and restore the berm back around 1999. And we were denied our Corps of Engineers application, primarily on the basis that in the intervening time between when that pipe deteriorated and the berm opened up, these beautiful wetlands were created between that berm and the back properties of Cedar Avenue, which if you go out there, they really are pristine wetlands, which is another criteria for our study is we want to keep those wetlands healthy even after we mitigate the flooding. So we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Early, that corrugated pipe was probably put in by the Army Corps.
Yes.
And when the canal was dredged in the 50s.
Yeah.
And obviously the Corps never maintained it. And to this day, they do not maintain any of those dredge sites.
As far as I know,
So anybody who uses them, and the city and other people who use those sites for dredge material depositing have to maintain the berms at their own expense.
Yeah, and that particular dredge spoil berm site way up by Cedar Avenue, I don't know that anybody uses
Well, nobody's
that.
using it.
Yeah,
because
for
because
years.
of the wetland thing. But the other spoil sites
It's
are still being utilized, and dredgers have had to go in and push up the wall in order to be able to use them.
Yeah.
And that's a requirement or the permitting from the Army Corps?
That's a requirement of an issuance of a permit. You have
Okay.
to do the improvements to maintain.
Okay.
And you also have to remove dredge materials if it's too full.
I know years ago, Gilbert Holt and I from the BPW went out there to investigate. We were doing some investigation, and Gilbert stayed in the truck while I went out and did all the investigation during tick season.
Yeah.
So I came back with like 100 ticks on me. Gilbert's in the truck.
Yeah.
I would not recommend going out there unless you.
No, it was something else.
I've done it. Thank you.
So that's just some historical background on why this particular area is being studied and why we've come up with our recommended alternative, which we'll talk about. As I mentioned, almost 100% of the flooding that we incur up on the West Cedar Avenue end is due to the northeast winds. Hey, we're going to get some this weekend. Brent and I kind of predict that, and this is typical of these northeast storms, they build over high tide cycles. We're thinking Sunday, Monday might be the actual highest surge tide, but we don't expect it to be anything like Winter Storm Jonas or even Zeta that we experienced in October 2020 that we're going to talk a lot about, just because of the position of the moon and the Earth in terms of its relation to the sun. The gravitational forces aren't as strong as they sometimes are. But it's still going to be higher than normal for sure, and we'll see what happens with the surge tide. So when we talked about doing this, Anne Marie, Janelle, Tom West at the time, Ellen Lorraine, we all put together there was funding available through FEMA/DEMA, through DEMA facilitates the funding. And we got a 75-25 matching grant to complete this study, and that's how this project was funded. Just so you know, once council provides direction, if we want to move forward with the recommended alternative, Janelle, Brent, and I are working on a DEMA hazard mitigation grant application right now that could potentially fund the whole thing, or at least part of it, based on our discussions with DEMA. So the purpose, real quick, was to consider and develop cost-effective alternatives to limit the flooding up on the West Cedar end, while maintaining those existing wetlands, which was a key feature of going into this. We didn't want to disturb those. So we're going to talk a lot about projected sea level rise and the effect on our recommended alternative. We're going to show you models of past storms that we all remember, and the full extent of the flooding that occurred during those storms to give you some perspective. We're going to show you the Zeta October 2020 in animation, so you can see over a couple minutes time how it comes in and how it floods, how it recedes, which is very interesting. As the tide ebbs, that surge flooding comes back off Cedar Avenue and recedes, and then 12 hours later, as the next high tide rolls in, it comes in. And that's what I was talking about before, just like even this weekend, it's going to build over those high tide cycles, and we kind of predict that Sunday and Monday might be the worst of it in terms of surge flooding, not rain. It's going to rain a lot. So we're going to, show you a lot of those historical events like Jonas, Sandy, the 1998 Northeasters that came back to back, one at the end of January and then the first week of February, which really affected that area and the whole city, and then Zeta. Oh, sorry. Keep going. Next slide.
You're on a roll.
Yeah, next slide.
Next slide.
Yeah, sorry about that.
He got ahead of himself.
Yeah. Well, I don't want you reading these slides. These are just placeholders for the discussion.
Next slide.
No, we're good.
This is good right here. Yeah, so we're going to inform you on National Weather Service flood notice thresholds. Like we've all heard of coastal flood advisories and major flood warnings and those sorts of things. We haven't heard anything yet. Brent was telling me that it's probably a little too early for this weekend for any of that to be, established or published.
I suspect Joe Thomas will have something out this afternoon.
Yeah, I can't think that it's not going to have some categorization, and we're going to show you what those are. There's 5 different ones, which I think you'll find interesting. We're also going to show you some projections that the number of high tides in the future above certain levels, we're expecting those to significantly increase every year. So much so that by 2050, there could be as many as like 150 days a year that the tides like 1.5 feet above what mean high water tide is now. So we've got those projections to consider as well.
Yeah, that was first reported in the Union of Concerned Citizens report about 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they use the tide charts out at the buoy.
Yeah. Yep. We're going to talk about this flood surge from the waters of the Delaware Bay and Atlantic Ocean